So I went searching the internet trying to find videos of people that replaced the slide floor in their RV slide in a kitchen slide. There is where the problem lies. There are lots of videos about people replacing a slide floor in a bedroom or a sofa slide. The job gets much more complicated when it's a kitchen slide with a fridge, cabinet, and oven and stove cabinet, and all of that stuff built in on top of the floor. In order to replace that floor, there's really no way around pulling everything out, or is there? I'm going to endeavor to tackle a terrible kitchen slide floor and see if I can't bring it back to life without pulling all of the cabinets out. So if you've got a messed up slide floor in your kitchen slide, or a slide that has a lot of cabinetry built on it, and you're wondering how in the world am I going to fix these damaged parts, take a look at this and see if this might not help you out or inspire some other great idea that's kind of springs off of what I'm doing here. So here we go. Well, we have a big Dutchman voltage toy hauler with 4 slides, and after 2 years full-time on the road, we're seeing some significant damage to the bottom of our slides in an area that really you wouldn't think should have been an issue. But what we're looking at right here is my multiple layers of temporary fixes on the road. What happens is water slides down the side of the slide, it comes down here, and in a normal case, it comes down and it wicks right around the bottom of here and goes right there into the bottom of the wood through this flimsy little teeny Tyvek that's barely waterproof after it's run up and down in and out of the slide multiple times. So I've just done a temporary solution on the road, thrown some duct tape on here or Gorilla tape, and allows the water to come down and it gives it a place to drip, so that it doesn't go under and run around and soak up into the wood. It is not a long-term solution by any means, but it was a help to get the water running away until we could get to a location where we could post up long enough to get access to tools and supplies and repairs. So here on this side of the RV, we've got the kitchen slide here and then a mid-bunk. All right, the bottom of my mid-bunk slide was showing some wear, but it wasn't terrible yet. And I was able to purchase some plastic RV skids, they're called, from Amazon. I'll put the link to these things that I bought in the description. And so in order to get these skids, these plastic skids added, I removed this bar right here, which is difficult to do because there's one screw inside on the other side of the wall that needs to be removed from the inside, and depending on your access to get to that inside screw can be a bit challenging. But don't start trying to pull this apart until you get the last screw, which again is sometimes you might have to put the slide in just a little bit to get access to that last screw with a small 90-degree screwdriver or a really short screwdriver, and then pull the thing back out. But I just want to give you a glimpse of what one looks like after it's been kind of put back together. These were a bit easier than what I'm going to tackle here on the other slides with more damage. All right, once you get the screws removed and the inner screw removed, on this one I had to move my slide in just a couple inches so I'd had access to reach around and get the screw from the inside. So once those screws are removed, this has got thick mastic behind it. It's kind of like a material that's sort of like silly putty if you're not familiar with it, and it's stuffed between this metal rub rail and here, in behind here. And so when you first go to take it off, it's going to be stuck on there pretty good. And so I use a flat scraper and kind of go all the way down here like this and break the seal, and then I shove this in behind here and start popping it loose. I've already broken this one loose a little bit, so it's a little easier to show you. And it starts coming off like that. Okay, now once this comes loose, you're going to notice that it's going to want to stick a little bit back in there because there is a wheel in there that helps align the slide as it goes in and out from front to back. And so this is wedged in between that wheel or rub rail, depending on the design. And so when you go to take it out, ensuring that all the screws are gone, you can start to just kind of move it down like this. and then just start wiggling a little bit. I'm not pulling real hard on it. I'm just wiggling a little bit and kind of cautiously pulling it out. Now, it's out. You can kind of see this material here that's on here. I'll give you a little look at this. It's just real kind of gummy, sticky. Yeah, sort of like chewing gum, silly putty. It's a material called mastic. I'm going to leave that in there. That stuff's pretty good. I'm going to add to it and put another layer on top of it to make sure it's squished in there and sealed up. This thing's kind of convex, got a little bit of a dip in it, so I'm going to put a little more mastic on it when I go to put it back on. But now you can see that we've got the aluminum side right here, and then right underneath there the water runs down, comes around, and gets right into the wood, and it starts just, you know, of course the Tyvek has long since worn away, and so that's where we're getting all that water damage. Another quick little tip, just in case, is go ahead and label those. Which one goes towards the front of the RV, which one goes to the back of the RV, and then just verifying which side goes to the outside. It just makes it a little easier if the project takes longer than a day. And if you're anything like me, you'll forget which one went where, and you'll think, oh, the holes will line up, it'll be obvious. And then the holes will be not that obvious. And something that should have been simple will take you 30 minutes. So save yourself the headache. Right on it right now before you forget. This trim piece had to come off. This trim piece is going to have to come off. This right here that we're looking at, that's actually the floor. The entire slide floor is just one piece of 3/4 inch OSB. That's it. It's wrapped with that Tyvek type stuff. Here's your linoleum. And when we go outside and look up underneath the slide where it's rotted, I can push all the way through right up to the linoleum. So I'm going to try and get creative and fix just part of the slide without having to tear all the cabinets and the stove and the fridge and everything out, because that's a bigger job than I want to tackle right now. Thankfully, there is a little bit of extra backing underneath the cabinetry right here across here. So I've got some multiple connecting points on this end. Obviously, I can go into the aluminum frame here, on the side of the aluminum frame here. I can go into the bottom of this bracing or bottom of the cabinet frame itself, and then in towards the inside. So what I'm hoping to do is remove from the end here down in maybe 12 inches, a strip 12 inches wide, and then cut all the way in and pull out just this end strip, leaving the rest of the slide floor, replace just this end strip, and then possibly laminate something over the top of the whole slide just to try and help reseal all of it before I put the slide skis on and put it back together. Not exactly sure if that will work, but you know, it's one of them things. I got an idea in my head, and let's see if we can bring it to reality. All right, we have a hole in the slide. Victory. Never thought I'd be excited to see through the bottom of my slide floor, but my bracing over there in the corner with the little 1x pine underneath the face frame of the slide itself is holding up the front corner of the slide there, and then underneath this section right here is where my 2x6 is on the jack on the outside, holding up the center. So I've got the slide effectively elevated so that I can now go and find another piece of 3/4 material to piece back in here. And then fortunately, this happens to be where there's a drawer with lots of room underneath the drawer slides. So I can add a bunch of bracing. I can put a joint over the top where the seam of the two pieces goes together. And then I can put some cross bracing across and just beef it up in general, which is pretty fortunate. Probably wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for access to the bottom of that drawer and to be able to beef up that joint that I'm going to make in there. Again, it's not the ideal fix by any means, but it is a realistic fix under the circumstances. So off to find some material. All right, just a little progress update. Got the new piece of plywood in, and the jack is lowered. It's just barely sitting there enough to just kind of hold the 2x4 in place so it doesn't fall down. And I've got both pieces now, the new piece and the old piece, flushed out on the inside and the outside. Again, definitely not the ideal solution, but under the circumstances, this is going to be okay. And I'll show you why I'm okay with this kind of less than ideal solution, just replacing part of the floor, because inside underneath, like I mentioned before, it goes in a cabinet. So let me show you what that looks like and how I'm going to beef it up and brace it up on the inside. Then I'll come back and we'll start tackling waterproofing the whole bottom of this and kind of weatherizing everything. I've cut out this little square of vinyl from the original slide, and I did that so that the brace that I'm gonna sister to the top of those, glue to the top of those and screw down, will adhere to wood. I didn't want to glue it to the linoleum. So I am going to prep that whole site in there, get it cleaned up again, and get everything glued and prepped, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I put the next piece in. All right, I got enough Gorilla Glue in there to hold up the Empire State Building. The cool thing about Gorilla Glue is as it sets up, it actually kind of foams and swells, and it pushes into the wood grain and just really jams together, especially on porous wood like OSB. It's a great adhesive. So now I'm going to sandwich my gusset over the top of that whole section and screw it down, making sure I use the proper length screws so they don't go out the bottom and poke holes in the part below that I'm going to try and waterproof next. So now is the gusset. Gusset is in, glued, screwed. See a loose screw back there, still going to grab. And ready to just let that be for a bit, let all that glue set up. And then start thinking through what I'm doing for weatherproofing on the bottom, and then of course think through how I'm gonna clean this up inside to get it all kind of trimmed back out properly so I don't have bare wood there, but get that sorted. All right, I made some progress yesterday and had it glued up overnight, so I'm gonna flip the camera around, kind of explain what I did to this point and why I left it glued up overnight. So let's take a look. So coming down underneath the slide, again, here's the fiberglass exterior slide, the new plywood that I put in, and then I laminated a piece of tin metal. It's like about a 29 gauge sheet metal that went the full length of the slide. I went down about, or the full width of the slide, excuse me, the front to the back, in and out. And I went about halfway down, and then now I'm going to work on doing the other side. But overnight, had it all glued up, and then had, of course, pressure push on it so that it set the glue up, and the tin is all basically laminated, glued to the bottom of the plywood. And then I'm going to pull this all down, make sure everything stays put where it should. Shouldn't be any reason why it doesn't. And then we're going to move over to the other side. All right, you'll notice on here, I've got these rollers. So previously, this slide was having such a hard time coming in and out. It's a heavy slide and it rubs exclusively on a rub rail. Kind of hard to show you. I was trying to peel this back, but up in behind there, you can just barely see it. It's just basically a big long piece of plastic that the slide actually just rubs straight in and out, just drags across. And so there's a lot of friction. It doesn't pull in and out real smooth. There's a lot of weight on there. So I had seen another guy that had done a modification where he cut out sections of the rub rail and add in these rollers, and that helped. And it definitely made the slide go in and out easier until the bottom started getting wet and coming across, the wood coming apart. So now I'm going to finish the repair on this side of the slide, and And then once you get it all put back together, there's going to be there's weather stripping that goes over the top of that. And of course they get all screwed back in. So on to the next part. All right, now we've got the other side all glued up with the metal flashing panel that goes across the bottom of the slide, up in and under the slide. And this is all just temporary to just give it some pressure to hold all the glue in place. So I'll leave that for several hours or until probably later this evening and pull it back down. And then I'll go to putting the slide ski back on over the top so that that edge there is covered. And I'll show you what it looks like on the finished product on the other side. All right, so slide ski's on the other side here. And then let's look up underneath here. So now you can see underneath the slide. Let me go to wide angle, give you a better perspective. So we've got the side, the rub rail, the slide ski, metal, and everything is laminated and glued together and super duper siliconed. The rub rail is put on with mastic behind it, silicone over the top of the seam. I'll let that all set up, give it one more once over. Then I've got to come back down in here, put the last roller in the corner there, and put my weather stripping on when it's all done, but gaining on it. So, middle of the project, fixing the bottom of the slides that have gotten rotted out and ruined because of rain and gigantic rainstorm. So I got the mid-bunk slide done yesterday, so it should be, knock on wood, it should be weatherproof. I got half of the kitchen slide done, and the other half I put some temporary stripping on the side of it to protect it from getting wet on the edge. So it is what it is, but look at that. It is, it's a beauty. Wind, rain. I guess we get to test out my bunkhouse slide ski fix. See how the water comes off of them. We are going to pull down all of this bracing now. I let it sit up overnight. And of course we had a huge rainstorm come through and I don't have the end of this sealed. So I put some Gorilla tape on there to kind of make a temporary water shield so that as the water came down the slide, it would hit the Gorilla tape and run away and not into the exposed wood. So never fails, right? There's always curveballs in a project like this. And all this bracing is just temporary. That is just to push the metal panel up that I laminated to the bottom of the wood slide and ensure that all of the Lexol silicone type material would have time to adhere and set up properly and be squished in really good. So I'm going to start pulling this down and then double check how all the glue and everything held. And I've got one more slide ski and rub rail to put on here. So I'll kind of document that process next and keep working away. Eventually today, Lord willing, I'm getting this slide done and onto the big sofa slide on the other side. Sweet, that looks great. I have some happy slides. All right, the screw on the left is the screw that came out of this rub rail originally. So pretty small, not a lot of meat on it. So I'm going to a bigger screw, as you can see here on the right. Square drive, the head will fit inside the countersink on the holes here. And I'm moving my rub rails up a little bit because where they were mounted really close to the bottom, these screws were actually going basically in the joint below the bottom of the aluminum framing and the plywood. And so they were kind of either hitting a little bit of plywood or barely skimming the bottom of the aluminum frame, but they were not going into a lot of meat. And so I'm moving my rub rails up just a little bit. They still line up on the, see if you can see that in there. It's kind of hard to see. Well, between the reflection, there you go. I think, so right back in there, behind my finger in here, it's really hard to get a camera on it in the right spot, but there's a small roller that goes vertical, and it's what this rub rail right here goes up against, and it's what keeps the slide, you know, kind of centered left to right to help it guide it in the slot. And so I'm making sure that my rub rail will still ride on that roller that's in behind there, but moving it up a little bit. As you can see, this new slide ski wraps around, covers the bottom of the plywood. The rub rail is going to sandwich the top edge of the slide ski. I've added 2 layers of mastic in behind the rub rail, and then I'm going with bigger screws that are going to go into the aluminum framing to give this a lot better bite to hold it in. And then when that's all done and set up, I'm going to cover the top of it with the Lexol silicone. I don't even know if it's actually really silicone, but it's supposed to work really good for outdoor repairs and stuff that'll stick to anything. So, all right, rub rail reinstalled. And as you can see here, I'll zoom in on things. We've got a bit of that mastic is squeezing out from behind there, which tells me we've got a nice, good squish going on between the rub rail, the top right here, the top of the plastic slide ski is about center of the rub rail. And then the rub rail is pinching the top of the slide ski, got tons of mastic squished in behind it. So that in and of itself is going to help create a waterproof barrier behind the rub rail into the slide ski so that moisture can't get down and work its way in behind the slide ski. But just to make sure, I'm going to clean up the top edge of this, and then we're going to throw some Lexol all the way down the outside of it, being careful to pull the weather stripping back and actually silicone way back in there as far as I can get with that Lexol, so that even if water kind of comes down and pools and runs this way, it'll all be sealed up as far in there as I can reach. All right, slide ski installed, rub rail installed, caulked, sealed, everything glued up, and I've given it many hours now with the bracing under it. So I just dropped the jack and pulled my bracing out of there. Everything's staying in place as it should. And now we're just gonna put the final parts back together. I'll flip the camera around and show you what I'm talking about, including a couple small little extra modifications to kind of just beef things up and make everything hold a little more secure. So let's take a look. Okay, this is of course propane electrical that goes out to the stove and the refrigerator, which is just temporarily, some of the mounting hardware has been removed here, and I'll show you where that mounts in a second, and then just temporarily bungee corded out of the way so I wasn't fighting against it as I was working around underneath here. So on the skirting here, right now it's really loose, and if you can see down yonder on the other slide, there is some metal aluminum framing that bolts or screws to the bottom of the slide in there. All right, so this is what I was talking about, that little metal assembly that goes in here, and it's just there really to secure this skirting, give it a little bit of structural support, but it's going to also help pin my whole laminated, you know, setup here. It's going to help sandwich it all together and just make sure that metal has one more good solid mechanical connection instead of just glue. So this normally went up here like so, and it had just a screw here and there, one on each end, and I've drilled a couple more holes, and even though it's only 4 screws, it's twice as many as it had to start with. And then of course there's other screws that go back in down here to hold the skirting to the framing itself. So we'll get that put back together. All right, as in many of the cases, the original screws, a lot of them come loose in this sheet metal over time. They wiggle around so much, pretty small, shallow thread depth, and the screws start to back out. So when I'm putting everything back together, I'm upsizing the gauge of the screw from like an 8 to a 10 gauge. And just putting a little bit more meat back in there so that everything's got a really good firm bite, and being really careful not to over tighten and strip stuff out in this really light gauge sheet metal. For the way the skirting wraps around and attaches to the bottom of the framing, again, there was originally 2 screws, and I've added a third just to give it one more connection point, and it really firms things up. Same thing up top, there's those 2 extra screws. And then on this side, as you can see, I've got rollers. That was a previous modification where I added some rollers in addition to the rub rail that's in here to make this big heavy slide go in and out a little bit easier. And now that everything else is put back together, next up is putting my weather stripping back in there, including I actually go through the weather stripping into the holes in the rollers, so there's no screw heads behind the weather stripping, so it mounts flush. I'll show you what that looks like as we get going with it as well. So more reassembly, here we go. All right, the moment of truth, the first official slide in and out. Let's see how it goes. Okay, go ahead. Sweet. All right, let me come over this side. Let's slide it back out. Beautiful. All right, nice and smooth. The slide skis are staying exactly where they're supposed to. And rub rails are looking fine. I think we have victory. All right, things went pretty well. The slide went in, the slide came out, everything sounded good, nice and smooth. Slide skis stayed exactly where they were supposed to. The metal didn't crinkle or warp or anything. I was a little curious how that was all gonna pan out, but nice and smooth, nice and quiet. And I think everything's gonna work great. And on top of that, we're pretty waterproof now. So should be good to go for another year or two. Living on the road full time, our RV takes a lot of abuse as it gets used for full-time living purposes, which of course these things were never meant to do. From the Yukon to Mexico and everywhere in between. We put some miles on it and take it into some pretty rugged terrain, using it to live an amazing life. If you want to learn more about the amazing life that we're living and the ministry that we're doing on the road, teaching the Bible, making disciples, starting home churches and all kinds of cool stuff, then check out some of the other videos that we've got on our channel, like the one that's going to pop up somewhere over here in just a second. You get the idea. See you on the next one.